Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking on a mission that's really specific and honestly pretty visual. We're basically generating the core data set for a special project we're calling Stickman Stats. And the goal is, well, it's brutally simple. We need to define and really visualize the true purchasing power of $100 at the grocery store between 1990 and today in 2026. We dove into the source material, and the high-level finding is it's a gut punch right away. Based on the overall consumer price index, the measure of a whole basket of goods and services, that $100 from 1990, it requires $247.99 in 2026 just to get the same buying power.
An incredible number.
I mean, that's a 148% cumulative price increase over 36 years. Just think about that loss of value. The dollar has, effectively lost 60% of its value?
It's a staggering macro number. But for a data project like Stickman Stats, we have to get much more granular. We need to look inside the grocery cart. That's where the pain is felt most immediately, most frequently. And what's crucial to establish right up front is that the inflation rate for food and beverages actually outpaced that overall CPI average.
Right. That small differential is so important. The overall CPI averaged, 2.55% per year?
Precisely. Across everything from cars to healthcare. But food and beverages clocked in just slightly higher, averaging 2.65%.
And that tiny gap, that tenth of a percentage point, it really adds up.
It compounds over 3.5 decades. And it's why food inflation just hits the shopper so much harder than the official average might suggest. And critically, we have to look past the sticker price. We have to account for these hidden inflation tactics, chief among them being, shrinkflation.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's get some hard data for the cart. The food and beverages price index increased by 156.55%. What does that mean in real dollars for you at the checkout line?
It means that if you were filling your cart with $100 worth of food in 1990, today, on average across the country, that exact same basket costs $256.55.
Wow. So over $156 more just to stay still?
That's the baseline we're working from, just to maintain a 1990 standard of consumption.
That's a really clear data point for our report, but I have to ask, is food inflation really the most aggressive factor? Or does it just feel that way because we buy it every week?
That's an essential question for context. And the answer is no, it's not the highest. Far from it, actually.
Right.
Medical care, for instance, has seen a total increase of almost 360% since 1990.
360? That's incredible.
And housing prices were also way higher, hitting a 272% cumulative increase. So while food has ballooned, it kind of pales in comparison to healthcare and shelter.
That really helps put it in perspective. Food isn't the fastest growing by percentage, but it's the one you have to confront every single week.
Exactly. The impact is instant and it's relentless. And for this Stickman Stats report to be truly accurate, we have to acknowledge that the inflation experience is intensely regional.
It varies a lot depending on where you live.
Massively.
Okay, so give us those extremes. They make a powerful visual comparison.
Okay, so consider two major metro areas. If you lived in a high inflation area like San Diego, California, that $100 shopping trip from 1990, it required $344.96 today. A 245% change.
Whoa.
But if you were shopping in St. Louis, Missouri, you felt the lowest rate. There, the change was only about 125%. So that same $100 only required about $225 today.
Wait. So the exact same $100 grocery basket costs almost $120 more in San Diego than it does in St. Louis.
That's the reality of the regional economy. The experience can vary by well over $100 depending entirely on where you live. That needs a powerful side-by-side bar chart for the report.
Absolutely. And looking forward, is this volatility easing up at all? What's the forecast for 2025 and 2026?
Well, the Economic Research Service forecasts that food prices will keep rising, but hopefully a little slower than the recent peaks. They're predicting 3% in 2025 and 2.7% in 2026. And for food at home, so your grocery bill, it's a little slower still.
Okay, so we're seeing some moderation. But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit counterintuitive. When you compare 1990 prices to 2020 prices, and you adjust them strictly for inflation, a lot of core staples are actually cheaper now, in real terms.
And this creates a huge cognitive dissonance, right? How can you feel so much financial pressure if the absolute building blocks of food are cheaper than they should be?
Let's put up the visuals for the Stickman Stats report. A pound of rice in 1990 cost 50 cents. Adjusted for inflation to 2020, it should have cost $1.01.
But it didn't.
The actual price in 2020 was only 73 cents.
That's way cheaper in real dollars. It's a huge miss for the inflation calculator.
Same thing for flour. A 5-pound bag was $1.25 in 1990, should have been $2.53 adjusted, but it was only $2.20. Even things like eggs and beef, they follow this long-term pattern.
And this counterintuitive fact that these core staples are underperforming inflation. That's exactly why we have to talk about the one thing that obscures all this data.
Histoflation.
Exactly. Shrinkflation.
Define it clearly for us. Why is it the necessary villain in this story?
Shrinkflation is that hidden inflation where the price tag stays the same, but the amount of product you get goes down. It's a stealth tactic. Manufacturers make the product smaller and just rely on the shopper not noticing.
And this is where our Stickman report needs to be, well, aggressive in its measuring. We can't just trust the label.
Absolutely not. You see it everywhere. The sources mention that classic bar soap has been resized and is now marketed as more ergonomic.
Which is code for there's less soap.
It's code for there's less soap. Or you see 12-packs that are just noticeably smaller than they used to be. This is why you have to look past the price. You have to judge paper towels by square feet per roll, ice cream by weight. That's how you capture the hidden cost increase.
So those long-term trends, rice and flour being historically cheap, they mask the reality that you're just buying less product for your money. And sometimes a single event can just completely override decades of stability. Let's talk about the egg crisis.
Well, the egg market is a perfect example of this. We have documentation from one tracker. They found an 18-pack of eggs going from $1.57 in 2019 to a staggering $10.99 in early 2025.
A nearly 7-fold increase. I mean, that volatility feels way more real than a steady 2.5% average.
It does. And that massive surge is linked directly to the highly pathogenic avian influenza, the HPAI outbreaks. And while prices have eased a bit, the forecast still predicts a massive 25% increase for egg prices in 2025.
So these shocks can just completely overwhelm the historical trends.
Completely.
Which brings us to a core question for the grocery landscape today. If processed staples like flour and sugar stayed cheap relative to 1990, why has healthy, fresh foods come defined as a luxury?
The Pew Research findings from March 2025 define this perception gap perfectly. We have near universal agreement. An overwhelming 90% of Americans agree that healthy food has gotten more expensive.
90%, that's basically everyone.
And 69% of adults say this makes it harder for them to eat healthy. And this is where income inequality really intersects with the shopping cart.
How so?
Well, 77% of lower-income adults feel this difficulty, compared to only 54% of upper-income adults. The cost barrier just hits lower-income groups so much harder.
So when people are in the aisle making those trade-offs, what are their actual priorities? What do they choose?
Taste. Taste is number one, hands down. 83% of Americans say taste is extremely important.
Okay, taste first. What's next?
Cost is second at 60%. And then healthiness trails in third place at 52%.
And that income gap we saw earlier must dictate that priority ranking.
It absolutely does. For lower-income Americans, 75% prioritize cost. That is 36 percentage points higher than upper-income adults. For a huge portion of the population, cost overrides healthiness. It's not a choice.
Healthiness becomes a luxury you have to be able to afford.
Exactly.
But what if that massive cost barrier is partly an illusion? We found one anecdote that seems to challenge all of this.
We did. And this is a powerful counterthesis. One person noted that by switching to a whole food vegan diet, focusing on those cheap staples like beans, rice, potatoes, they dropped their grocery bill by almost 40%.
40%. Just by switching to whole food staples, that seems to fly in the face of what 90% of people believe.
It illustrates that the perceived high cost of healthy food is often tied to expensive convenience items, prepackaged goods, trendy ingredients. If you go back to the basic building blocks, the same staples that are technically cheaper now, you can dramatically counteract that cost.
So if staples are down but the overall cart is up, what's driving the volatility we're seeing right now in 2025 and 2026?
We have to look at the Producer Price Index, the PPI. This is the wholesale price, and it's a preview of what's coming to the consumer. The meat market is a huge example.
Okay.
Farm-level cattle prices rose 26.5% year over year leading up to August 2025. This is driven by a cyclical contraction of the national herd.
So fewer cattle, higher prices.
Exactly. And that wholesale pressure is directly tied to the prediction of an 11.6% retail price increase for beef and veal in 2025.
And it's not just the commodities, right? It's the cost to grow and move them.
That's a huge persistent factor. Input costs like fertilizer and transport have just skyrocketed, more than doubling since 2019. And that's directly tied to the cost of natural gas. You just can't insulate the grocery store from global energy markets.
But is that price pressure merely passed on, or is it being exploited? This brings us to the theory of greedflation.
Right. The greedflation theory argues that producers don't just hike prices to cover their costs. They use the veil of general inflation, the feeling that everything is getting more expensive, to strategically maximize profits way beyond what's necessary.
They're using it as cover.
They're using it as cover because food is a necessity. The demand is inelastic.
And the data on corporate performance, it certainly raises some questions.
It does. Sources note that massive food producers like General Mills and Nestle are operating at stunning profit margins, 30 to 50%. Then the grocery stores add another 20% on top of that. This is happening while CEO compensation is rising 10 to 50% year on year. The argument is that these companies are just leveraging a captive audience for record profits.
So if that's the reality, if corporate profits and convenience are overwhelming the stability of staples, what's the most successful solution available to most people?
The sources repeatedly point to one answer that aligns both cost control and health outcomes: home cooking.
Just cooking at home.
Just cooking at home. Nearly 9 in 10 adults do it a few times a week, but the real health benefits come from consistency. The data strongly links the behavior to positive health outcomes. People who eat home-cooked meals every single day are significantly more likely to describe their diets as healthy, 29%, compared to just 12% of those who cook less.
So let's synthesize this for our Stickman Stats listener.
Okay. In 2026, your $100 requires $248 just to match 1990's overall purchasing power. That's the macro story. The micro story is that, counter to how you feel, many foundational staples are technically cheaper in real terms than they were 36 years ago.
But that doesn't feel true.
It doesn't. Because recent dramatic shocks, like the egg crisis, coupled with the persistent hidden pressure of shrinkflation, where you are literally getting less product for your dollar, it completely obscures that fact. You feel poorer because, fundamentally, manufacturers are giving you less.
That dichotomy is the perfect knot to untie. And when we connect that back to the solution that cooking daily leads to healthier diets, we see a fascinating implication, especially with the income gap. Since lower-income families are forced to prioritize costs, this raises an important final question for you to think about. Is the true indicator of a healthy diet in 2026 not what you buy, since the basic staples are cheap, but how often you can afford the time and the effort to prepare it yourself? Conversely, the sources found that ordering delivery or takeout is linked to less healthy diets. In the 2026 grocery landscape, convenience has become the hidden high cost of an unhealthy life. Think about that the next time you buy pre-cut produce or press a delivery button. Did the ease of that purchase cost you more than just money? Did it cost you health?